who came to his aid, stood by his side, and were willing to sacrifice everything for him, only to find out that the whole thing was just another hoax. That and the flag decision has caused the lowest ratings ever. I'm not sure what he means by the drivers were willing to sacrifice it all, but we're getting this all in real time. Stephen A., I'll start with you here. What are your thoughts on the social climate surrounding sports right now?
Well, listen, I'm very concerned about it, obviously, but I think there's a lot of positives to peel from it. I like the fact that folks are getting out there and speaking and making sure that their voices and their thoughts are heard. I love the fact that you have folks in white America that finally appear more receptive to actually listening and engaging in a conversation on race. And the discrepancies and the inequality that obviously it wreaks. But I think about this. I think about the tweet from President Trump that you just showed us. Then I think about Daniel Snyder with the Washington Redskins. And I say it's because of the behavior of our president that you have people like Daniel Snyder that's been able to hold on to the Redskins name for so long. Let's just call it what it is. The reality is, you got a lot of people that want to castigate and label the president with names and stuff like that. That's not the place for this. We're not going to engage in that kind of bantering or whatever. But what we will say, and what's easy to say, is that his behavior comes across as highly, highly insensitive. And he might be utilizing it for political means because he's feeding his base the fodder that it needs to remind them that he's with them and whatever. But all it does is really put on display and illuminate the divide that exists in this nation. And it's something that he's feeding off of for his own individual purposes. Make no mistake about it. And if you're a Daniel Snyder, for example, and you use the word never to talk about how you would never change the Redskins name back in 2013 and then again in 2014, it's easy if there's a whole bunch of people out there who think like this president at least wants to disseminate that he thinks like, and say, you know what, I can hold on to this because it's not going to affect my bottom line. Because with Daniel Snyder, it was about the money. But it's one of the reasons why we consistently have pointed out, particularly over the last several weeks, Domonique, that it's not enough to not be a racist. You've got to be an anti-racist. You got to stick out your check and embolden yourself and speak proudly against racist behavior, racist activities, racist legislation, racist policies, and the like. You have to be able to do that, because if you don't do that, then all of a sudden somebody like this man, our president, will go out there and disseminate the kind of messages that leads to a divide. And I want to emphasize again, I have no problem with our policy here at ESPN in terms of Jimmy Pitaro and ESPN not wanting us to engage in politics. I am not talking about politics. I'm not getting into Supreme Court justice appointees. I'm not getting into, scrolling back the Affordable Care Act or anything like that. I'm not engaging in anything political. I'm talking about the behavior of a president. And the reason why I keep bringing that up is because this man is 74 years old and allowed to conduct himself in a very divisive manner. But if young dudes in their 20s were to engage in that kind of behavior, they would be ostracized, they would be excoriated, they certainly wouldn't be able to profit off of it on Madison Avenue or anywhere else, and by and large, they would be held in check. It's just amazing to me that even in this day and age, we will sit back and hold 19, 20, 21, 25, 30-year-old men, particularly African-American men, more accountable than we would grown-ass white individuals in positions of power who are supposed to be in leadership positions and supposed to be bringing us together. And instead, at every turn, they engage in divisive tendencies. It's really unfortunate and very, very hypocritical. The floor is yours, Domonique.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because on this network and for many years, and in sports in particular, we do a lot of criticizing. And you can go to Twitter today. There are plenty of people criticizing Cam Newton for having a cocky video. But those same people are often the same people who would defend the president for tweeting out something that is not only divisive, as you mentioned, but also factually inaccurate, like implying that somehow the noose hanging in the garage was a hoax, and implying that Bubba was kind of led it or made it up. Like, no, there was a noose there. There's problems with that. And Bubba was not the one who reported it. So all that implication is there. And I will respect your show, Stephen A., and we won't engage in any name calling, mainly because, or any judgment necessarily, mainly because I think that's probably what he wants. Like, this feels like whenever things get a little hot, it's time to do a little misdirection and trying to get something else for us to look at, and he wants us all to yell and scream about how racist this tweet is, so we don't take into account how the coronavirus has been being handled by this country. And we can't fall into that trap necessarily. That's a misdirection. So it's fine. We know who he is. He's made it clear who he is through the things that he's said over the last several years and the things that he's done over the last several years. So we could care not about that nearly as much as we care about the important things, because his tweets, while they do have impact, they aren't as important as the decisions that he's making and the way that we go forward in this country. So I think that this is a misdirection, and it is, we are a sports network, so we have to talk about it because it is sports related, but I could care less about what he's tweeting, because his goal and his strategy appears to be he's picked a very passionate base, and he's kind of turned his back on the rest of our country and the rest of the way that most of us at least purport ourselves to think, and he's leaning into this small base of people who are comfortable with this type of language, and it's not something that I think we should necessarily give a lot of credit or attention to, but it's certainly something that we should take a moment to condone and point out the inaccuracies that are in that tweet.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.